My name's Ray Walker. I've been a truck driver here in the United States for over 15 years. If you've ever pulled an all-nighter behind the wheel of a big rig, you'll know what I mean when I say, those empty highways at night can play tricks on your mind. But sometimes it's not just your imagination. I've heard plenty of strange stories from other drivers at truck stops. Tales about shadowy figures walking the shoulder, ghost lights out in the desert, people who vanish without a trace. I used to laugh them off, chalk it up to fatigue, caffeine jitters, or just plain boredom on the road. Until one night, I lived through something that still keeps me awake to this day. I've driven across almost every state in this country, but there's something about the roads in Montana at night that feels different. The endless stretches of pine forest, the winding highways that seem to swallow your headlights whole, the way the sky feels too big, too empty. It's beautiful in the daylight, but in the dead of night, it can feel like the loneliest place on earth. And it was there, on one of those late-night runs, when I stumbled into something I wish I'd never seen. If you're listening right now, let me ask you something. What would you do if you were driving alone at night, and you saw signs that a child might be in danger? Would you pull over? Would you investigate? Or would you keep on driving and hope someone else stopped? I thought I knew what kind of man I was. I thought I'd always pull over, but that night made me question everything. Let me take you back. This was late fall, a few years ago. I had just finished loading out of North Dakota, hauling toward western Montana. It was a run I'd done before. Nothing special, just a few pallets of dry goods for a grocery chain. The kind of boring load you almost forget about once you deliver. But what I remember isn't the cargo. It's what happened on the road that night. I'd been up too long already. Dispatch had pushed me hard, and I'd pushed myself harder. That's the game sometimes. You know your body's begging for rest, but you figure 1 more hour, 2 more hours, then I'll stop. I had a couple cans of energy drink in the cup holder, and I'll admit, a little bottle of smelling salts in the dash. Truckers aren't supposed to admit stuff like that, but hey, I'm not here to sugarcoat it. Around midnight, I was crossing a quiet stretch near the tree line. No other headlights for miles. The hum of the tires on the asphalt was starting to lull me into that dangerous half-asleep state. I cracked open the salts, took a whiff, and tried to focus. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was just trash in the road, maybe a plastic bag, or some cloth someone lost from a car roof. But as I got closer, the high beams caught it and my stomach dropped. It wasn't trash. It was a purple dress, lying right there in the middle of the lane. I slowed down hard, my tires groaning against the pavement. The dress was crumpled like it had been tossed or dropped in a hurry. Something about it felt off. Too deliberate, too out of place on a deserted highway at night. I sat there for a moment, my truck idling, staring at that dress through the windshield. My hands were tight on the wheel. Every instinct in me said it was wrong. But I kept rolling forward, and that was only the beginning. I'll tell you something about being a truck driver. The road trains you to notice details. It's part survival, part instinct. You learn to recognize when something's off. A car pulled over at an odd angle, tire marks cutting into gravel, a shadow where no shadow should be. When you're out here night after night, you learn to pay attention, because one wrong move could cost you your life. That's why the sight of that purple dress, it hit me hard. I slowed down and rolled past it at barely 10 miles an hour, my headlights brushing over the fabric. It looked new, not old and weather-beaten like something that might have fallen off a passing car, and the way it lay across the yellow line, spread open like somebody had placed it there, made my skin crawl. I thought about stopping. I really did. But another part of me screamed, no. I told myself, maybe it just fell off the back of a car. Maybe somebody dumped old clothes. Don't overthink it, Ray. Just keep driving. But I couldn't shake it. That purple dress stuck in my head like a warning bell. The thing about Montana backroads is, once you notice something strange, your brain starts playing tricks. You've got hundreds of miles of silence ahead, no other drivers to share the road with, and suddenly, every sound inside your cab feels magnified. The rattling of loose change, the hiss of the air brakes, even your own breathing starts to feel too loud. I drove another 10 miles trying to shake it off. But then, there it was again. Not the dress this time. A pair of shoes, white sneakers, small enough that they couldn't have belonged to an adult. I tapped the brakes, staring through the windshield as I passed them. They were lined up neatly on the shoulder, like someone had taken them off and set them down. I muttered out loud, even though nobody was there to hear me. No way. No damn way this is random. By now, my fatigue was gone, replaced with a knot of adrenaline sitting in my stomach. I didn't like where this was going. Still, I kept moving. I told myself I'd stop at the next lit gas station and call it in. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe some family had pulled over earlier and tossed their kids' old things out the window. People do stupid stuff, right? I tried to convince myself of that. But another 15 minutes down the road, I saw something that tore through that lie. Scattered across the asphalt, in the beam of my headlights, were children's clothes. A t-shirt, a pair of little jeans, even a stuffed animal lying on its side, half flattened. I slowed almost to a stop, my hands slick on the wheel. This wasn't just weird anymore. This felt staged. Planted, like breadcrumbs leading me into the trees. And that's when the thought hit me. What if a kid really was out there? What if someone needed help? I pulled my rig to the shoulder and let the engine idle, the red glow of my taillights casting long shadows on the road behind me. The forest on either side of the highway felt alive, like it was leaning closer, listening. I sat there for a long moment, arguing with myself. Get out and check. Ray, don't be heartless. No, stay in the truck. This isn't right. It smells like a setup. Finally, I reached for my flashlight, popped the door open, and climbed down. The gravel crunched under my boots, and the night air bit sharp in my lungs. It was colder than I expected. The kind of cold that makes the hairs on your arms stand straight up. I walked toward the pile of clothes, my light trembling just enough to make me curse under my breath. Every instinct screamed that I shouldn't be there, but I kept moving, slow and cautious, scanning the tree line. That's when I heard it. A sound that froze me in place. A child screaming. Not just crying, screaming, like they were in pain, desperate, calling for help. The voice carried from deep in the woods, maybe 30, 40 yards back. My heart slammed against my ribs. I took a step forward, then stopped, because something about the sound wasn't right. It was too clean, too perfect, no stuttering breaths, no sobbing. Just the same pitch and tone repeating like a loop. I swung my flashlight across the trees, but all I could see were dark trunks and shifting shadows. The screaming continued, sharp and unnatural, echoing through the night. And that's when it hit me like a punch in the gut. It wasn't a child. It was a recording. Somebody was out there with a speaker playing those cries, waiting for me to follow the sound into the woods, and they were watching me. I couldn't see them, but I could feel it. Eyes in the dark, tracking me as I stood there by the clothes, frozen between running back to my cab and stepping toward the trees. My mouth went dry. My flashlight beam shook over the stuffed animal lying in the dirt. That's when I heard a new sound. Something heavy shifting in the underbrush. More than one set of footsteps. I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I've had close calls on the road before. Bad weather, reckless drivers. Even one time when my brakes nearly gave out on a downhill grade. But nothing. And I mean nothing. Felt like what I was standing in right then. That scream echoing out of the woods. Too perfect, too mechanical. It crawled under my skin. And those footsteps, multiple sets, shuffling and snapping twigs just beyond the tree line. I froze with my flashlight pointing into the darkness, my heart hammering so hard, I swore they could hear it. That's when it hit me. This wasn't random. It wasn't some abandoned clothes on the road. It wasn't a kid needing help. It was a trap. Someone had laid out the dress, the sneakers, the t-shirt, all of it as bait, and now they were waiting, just beyond the trees, for me to take the next step. I backed up slowly, my boots crunching against the gravel. Every part of me screamed, "Get back in the truck! Don't look back! Don't run! Just move!" But before I could even turn, something shot out from the trees. A small dark object, fast, cutting through the air. The next thing I knew, my passenger side window exploded with a deafening crack. Shards of glass rained across the cab, glittering in my flashlight beam. I ducked, throwing my arms up, my ears ringing. For a second I thought they'd fired a gun. But no, this was different. More like a rock or a heavy piece of metal. Whatever it was, it hit hard enough to fracture the glass into a spiderweb of cracks. I didn't wait to see what came next. I sprinted back to my rig, yanking the door open so fast it nearly swung off the hinge. My flashlight clattered to the ground as I scrambled inside. The fake screams were still blaring, looping, taunting me. But now there were other sounds too. Real voices. Low. Muffled. Laughter. Someone out there was laughing. I slammed the door, jammed the gear shift into drive, and floored the gas. My engine roared to life, and the whole truck lurched forward, tires spitting gravel as I tore back onto the highway. In the mirror, under the faint glow of my taillights, I swore I caught movement, shadows darting back into the trees, figures melting into the darkness. I didn't care. I was gone. For the next 30 miles, I kept the pedal down, hands clenched so tight around the wheel that my knuckles turned white. Every passing shadow on the side of the road felt like it was about to leap at me. My cracked passenger window whistled with the cold night air, the sound like a constant reminder. They got close. Too close. I tried to steady my breathing, but the adrenaline wouldn't let me. My mouth was dry, my chest tight. I kept asking myself the same questions over and over. What did they want? Why target me? Was it robbery? Something worse? I'll never forget that laugh. It wasn't the kind of laugh you hear when somebody's joking with their buddy. No, this was darker. The kind of laugh you hear when somebody knows they almost had you. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't just about me, that setup, clothes scattered, fake screams, wasn't designed just for truckers. It was designed for anyone driving through, A parent, maybe, who'd panic and run straight into those woods. I kept thinking, what if I had gone in? What if I'd followed those cries, flashlight in hand, deeper into the trees? Would I have come back out? Or would my rig still be parked there on the shoulder, door hanging open, engine idling, while I was gone forever? I tried calling it in on my CB, but no one answered. The roads were dead that night, so I told myself I'd wait until I hit the next town with a station. Still, part of me worried they'd follow. I kept checking my mirrors, looking for headlights. Nothing. Just miles and miles of blacktop stretching into forever. By the time I hit the outskirts of the next town, I pulled straight into the police station parking lot. I must have looked insane. Storming in there, wide-eyed, hands still shaking, I told the officers everything. The clothes, the screams, the figures in the woods, the glass shattering. One of the younger cops looked skeptical, like he thought maybe I'd imagined it. But another guy, older, just nodded. He told me there'd been other reports. Strange activity on that highway. Cars stopped, drivers spooked, even one missing person case from a year back. That shut the younger one up real quick. They took my statement, said they'd send a unit out to check. But I could tell from the way they glanced at each other that they didn't expect to find much. And honestly, I didn't care if they did. I just wanted to put as much distance between me and that stretch of road as possible. I climbed back into my truck, brushed the shards of glass off the seat, and kept moving. Finished my delivery like nothing had happened. But believe me, it happened. And I'll never forget it. Because every time I close my eyes, I still see that purple dress lying in the road. And every time the wind howls through a cracked window, I hear that laugh, low, mocking, reminding me how close I came to stepping into the woods and never coming back. So let me ask you, if you were out there, alone in the middle of nowhere, and you heard a child screaming in the woods, would you stop? After that night, I'll be honest with you, trucking never felt the same. Before, the road was freedom, a kind of therapy. Just me, my rig, and miles of open highway. There was comfort in the routine. Stop for fuel, grab a coffee, listen to some country radio, keep the wheels turning. But after I saw that purple dress, those shoes, those clothes scattered like bait, every shadow started to feel dangerous. Every time I saw something lying on the road, an old tire, a piece of tarp, even a deer carcass, my chest tightened. My first thought wasn't hazard, it was trap. That's the thing about experiences like this. They change you in ways you don't expect. I found myself gripping the wheel tighter at night, scanning the tree line for movement, double-checking my mirrors every 5 minutes. And the fatigue, that bone-deep exhaustion that comes with this job, suddenly felt like a liability more than ever. Because when you're tired, you second-guess yourself. You start thinking, maybe I imagined it, maybe I'm just hallucinating from the long hours. But then I'd glance at my cracked passenger window, the spiderweb pattern still there. And I'd know, I didn't imagine a damn thing. Sometimes, people don't understand what it means to live on the road. Folks in towns and cities, they go home every night, shut their doors, turn the lights on, and feel safe. But truckers, we're out there in the dark, on empty highways, hundreds of miles from the nearest police station or hospital. When something happens, something like what I went through, you realize real quick just how alone you are. That night taught me something else, too. Evil doesn't always look the way you expect. It doesn't wear a mask or hide behind movie monsters. Sometimes it's just a group of people in the woods with a cheap speaker and a cruel idea. And the scariest part? Their plan almost worked. I keep thinking about the what-ifs. What if it had been a young couple instead of me? Somebody without the years of experience to recognize when something feels wrong. What if it had been a parent, desperate, hearing those screams and charging into the woods without a second thought? That thought keeps me awake at night more than anything. Because whoever set that trap, they weren't just trying to spook someone. They were hunting, and that makes me sick. Now, I didn't quit trucking after that. Lord knows I've put in too many years, too many miles to walk away. But I changed. I stopped running certain routes at night. I carry extra emergency gear, not just for breakdowns, but in case I ever get into another situation where someone tries to pull me off the road, and I've made it my mission to talk about it. To tell other drivers, keep your eyes open. Don't fall for setups. If you see something suspicious, report it, but don't risk your life trying to be a hero. Because I'll tell you right now, those people out there, they weren't amateurs. The placement of the clothes, the timing of the screams, the way they waited for me to step toward the trees. It was organized, coordinated. I don't think I was their first target, and I don't think I was meant to be their last. There's a saying among truckers, the road will show you everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've had people wave at me from small-town diners. Families thank me for delivering goods. Strangers buy me coffee at fuel stops. That's the good. The bad, long hours, aching joints, missing birthdays, and watching your kids grow up through FaceTime calls. But the ugly is what I ran into that night. The ugly is knowing there are people out there who see truckers as prey. And let me tell you, once you've stared into the ugly, you never drive the same again. Even now, years later, if I'm out on a lonely stretch of Montana highway and I see something lying in the road, I keep rolling. Doesn't matter if it's a shirt, a backpack, even a toy. I don't stop. Because I'd rather live with the guilt of not checking than risk never making it home. And that, right there, is the hardest part of this story. Because deep down, I'm still asking myself, what if it really had been a child? I'll never know the answer, and maybe that's the real trap. The one they set in my head, long after the road ended. Even now, when I'm parked at a rest stop in the dead of night, engine off, the silence pressing in around me, I sometimes swear I can hear it. That same scream, faint, looping just beyond the trees, and I have to remind myself, it's not real, it's just a memory. But memories can haunt you just as much as anything flesh and blood. You spend enough years on the road, you realize every mile has a story. Some are funny, some are tragic, but some are warnings, and this is mine. You know, when I tell this story, people always have questions, and I don't blame them. If I was on the other side listening, I'd have the same ones. So let me try to answer a few. The first one I always hear is, Ray, why didn't you just stop sooner and call the cops? Well, here's the thing. Out there on a dark Montana back road, you don't always have signal. And even if you do, the closest unit might be 40, 50 miles away. By the time help gets there, whatever was happening is long over. That's the reality of rural America most folks don't realize. In cities, you dial 911, and there's sirens in minutes. Out on the highway, minutes turn into hours. You're on your own until somebody finds you. Another question is, Why didn't you check the woods? What if a kid really was in trouble? And listen, I've asked myself that same thing every day since. But let me ask you, if you're alone, in the dark, in the middle of nowhere, and something doesn't add up, do you risk your life on a maybe? Because I'll tell you straight, those screams weren't real. I knew it in my bones. They had that flat mechanical loop to them. I wasn't hearing a child. I was hearing a speaker. If I had gone into those woods that night, you wouldn't be hearing this story. Someone else would be driving my rig, and I'd be a name on a missing persons report. And maybe that's exactly what those people wanted. Now another one. Ray, why would anyone go through all that trouble? What's the point? I wish I had a solid answer. Some say it's robbery. Some say worse. I've talked to other drivers, heard whispers about trafficking setups, or gangs testing out traps on isolated roads. But here's the part that chills me most. None of them wanted my wallet or my rig. If all they wanted was a quick score, they could have done it. They could have slashed my tires, forced me out, taken the truck. No, this felt darker, smarter, like they wanted me. And that's the question I'll never get out of my head. Why? Now here's another big one I hear. Ray, would you stop again if you heard a child screaming? And that's the hardest question of all, because the decent part of me, the part raised to help others, wants to say yes, I want to believe I'd be the guy who steps in, who saves someone. But after that night, I don't think I could. I'd call it in, sure. I'd honk my horn, flash my brights, do whatever I could from the cab. But stepping into the woods again, I can't see myself doing it. And maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe it makes me cold. But I'd rather be alive with guilt than dead with good intentions. Now let me tell you something about trucking life most people don't get. When you're out here, you don't have backup. There's no partner riding shotgun, no crowd of bystanders to intervene. It's just you, your rig, and a whole lot of silence. That silence can play tricks on you. Some nights it's peaceful, other nights it's heavy, like it's holding secrets you don't want to hear. That night with the purple dress, the silence was the worst part. Even after I drove away, cracked glass whistling in the wind, I kept turning the radio on just to drown out the quiet, because the quiet sounded too much like those screams, looping over and over. Now another question folks ask is, Ray, why do you keep driving if stuff like this happens? And believe me, I've thought about quitting, hanging up the keys, finding some 9-to-5 where the scariest thing I face is a grumpy customer or a late paycheck. But the truth is, I love the road. Always have. Since the first time I climbed behind the wheel of a big rig, I knew this was my life. There's a freedom to it, a sense of purpose. And somebody's gotta keep America moving. Food on the shelves, medicine in hospitals, fuel in stations. It all gets there because of drivers. So I keep driving. But I drive different now. I'm sharper, more cautious, less trusting. You show me a car stopped at night with its hazards flashing, I don't pull right in behind it anymore. I stop a good distance away, lights on, CB ready. You want help? You wave me down where I can see you. And if that makes me sound paranoid, well, maybe I am, but paranoia keeps you alive. Here's the last question I'll answer for now. Ray, what would you say to the people who set that trap if they're listening right now? I'd say this. You didn't win. You wanted me in those woods. You wanted me scared. Maybe gone. But I'm still here. And I'm gonna keep telling this story every chance I get. Because maybe one of you listening right now will be out on a dark stretch of highway someday. And you'll see something strange. a dress, a shoe, a scream in the distance. And you'll remember my voice telling you, don't fall for it. Stay in your rig. Keep rolling. If that keeps even one driver safe, then those people in the woods failed twice. Once when they didn't get me, and again when I helped somebody else see through their trap. You know, after that night in Montana, I started seeing the road differently. Before, I used to think of night driving as the quiet shift. Peaceful. Cool air. Empty highways. The kind of time where a driver can just think. Now, every rest stop feels like it has shadows watching me. Every pull-off looks like a setup. And even a crumpled fast food bag on the shoulder makes me wonder if it's hiding something sharp enough to blow a tire. It's not just paranoia, it's survival. Because once you've been through what I've been through, you learn the hard truth. Not every danger out here comes with flashing hazard lights. Some of it hides in the dark, waiting for drivers like me. I remember the first time I pulled into a truck stop after it all happened. This was in Wyoming, just outside Cheyenne. Middle of the night, maybe 2:30 a.m. I was exhausted, hadn't eaten since noon, and I figured I'd grab a coffee and stretch my legs. Now, usually, truck stops are like a little oasis for us. Bright lights, people moving around. The hiss of air breaks from rigs parking. But that night, I couldn't relax. Every stranger felt suspicious. The guy leaning against the vending machine. I caught myself staring, wondering if he'd been in the woods that night. The woman at the counter ringing up coffee. Her voice startled me when she asked if I wanted a receipt. That's how deep it got into my head. I carried my cup back to the truck, sat in the cab, and just listened to the silence of the lot. Other drivers came and went, headlights sweeping across my cracked passenger window. And I thought, they have no idea what's really out here. They think the biggest danger is falling asleep at the wheel or hitting a deer. But I knew better now. Later that week, I tuned into the CB radio, Channel 19. Just killing time while I rolled through Nebraska. Some drivers were swapping stories. Bad weather, highway patrol sightings, jokes about bad diner food. Then one guy said something that froze me. He said, "You ever notice how sometimes you see shoes on the side of the road? Like kids' shoes? Don't stop for those. They ain't there by accident." The radio went quiet for a beat. Then another voice cut in, "Yeah, I heard about that. Some guys set things out to make you pull over. Happened to a buddy of mine up in North Dakota. I didn't even key the mic. I just listened, my stomach sinking. Because suddenly, I realized it wasn't just me. Other truckers had seen it too. And maybe some hadn't made it back to tell the story. That's when I started hearing the folklore. Truck stop whispers. Stories that drivers only share at 3 a.m. over cheap coffee or on the CB when the highway's empty. Some say there are gangs that hunt the highways, targeting long-haul drivers because they know we're alone. Others talk about organized setups, human trafficking rings using fake distress signals to lure people. And then there are the stranger ones. The kind you'd expect from tired men swapping ghost stories. People talk about phantom hitchhikers, ghost cars, even screams in the woods that no one can explain. Now, I don't know how much of that is true, but I do know what I saw. That purple dress, those sneakers, that looping scream, that wasn't folklore. That wasn't imagination. That was real people, with real bad intentions. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized how vulnerable we are out here. Think about it. A trucker pulls over, steps into the dark, and vanishes. Who's gonna notice right away? The delivery might be late, sure, but companies assume breakdowns happen. Dispatch might try to reach you, but if your phone's off or tossed in a ditch, that rig could sit for hours, maybe days, before anyone checks. That's a lot of time for somebody to disappear. So yeah, I changed how I drove after that. I don't just check my mirrors, I live in them. I keep my high beams on longer than I used to, sweeping the road ahead like a spotlight. And if I gotta pull over, I make sure it's somewhere lit, busy, with other rigs around. Oh, most of all, I trust my gut. Because my gut saved me that night. And let me tell you something, folks. If you're ever on the road and something doesn't feel right, don't argue with that voice in your head. Don't let guilt or doubt push you into danger. Listen to your instincts. They're louder than you think. I guess that's the biggest lesson the highway has taught me. Instinct over hesitation. I've put in 15 years behind the wheel, coast to coast, through storms and desert heat, mountains and plains, and I thought I'd seen it all. But that night in Montana, it showed me there are things on these roads you can't prepare for. The best you can do is survive them. And if you do survive, well, you carry those miles with you. They live in your rear view, following you into every new stretch of highway. Some drivers call it paranoia. Others call it caution. Me, I call it staying alive. Because out here, the line between routine and nightmare is thinner than you think. You'd think one terrifying encounter would be enough to last a lifetime. But when you spend your life on America's highways, you realize danger doesn't always strike once. Sometimes it circles back. This one happened about 6 months after Montana. I was hauling a load through Missouri, cutting across I-70 in the middle of a thunderstorm. Sheets of rain. Visibility shot to maybe 20 feet. The kind of storm where you lean forward in your seat, squinting like that'll make a difference. It was late, close to 1 a.m., and I hadn't seen another car for miles. Just me, my rig, and the downpour. That's when I saw him. A man, standing on the shoulder, thumb out, soaking wet. Now, if you don't know trucking culture, let me explain something. We're not supposed to pick up hitchhikers. Liability, company policy, safety. Most of us stick to that rule. But sometimes your heart argues with your head. And that night, I felt that pull. This guy looked desperate. Tall, thin, his hair plastered to his head from the rain. He wore a flannel shirt and jeans, no jacket, just standing there like he'd been dropped into the storm. I slowed, not stopping, just easing off the gas, thinking maybe I'd call highway patrol once I got a signal. But as my headlights swept across him, I saw something that made my blood run cold. His clothes were wet, yeah, but his shoes weren't. They were bone dry. That detail hit me like a brick. Because there's no way, standing in that downpour, that his shoes could be dry. Unless he hadn't been standing there long. Or unless he hadn't been standing there at all until right then. I pressed harder on the wheel, eyes locked forward, and eased back on the accelerator. My gut was screaming at me, "Don't stop!" As I rolled past, I glanced into my side mirror. The shoulder was empty. No man, no figure, just the reflection of my red taillights in the wet asphalt. I blinked, leaned forward, even flicked my high beams back. Nothing. He was gone. Now, maybe exhaustion was playing tricks on me. Maybe it was the rain, the glare, the long hours. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking as I drove. Here's the part that gets me. A mile down the road, through the curtain of rain, I swear I saw him again. Same man, same flannel, standing on the shoulder, thumb out, shoes, bone dry. I didn't slow this time. I gripped the wheel and barreled forward, heart thundering louder than the rain on my cab. By the time I hit the next town, my nerves were shot. I parked under the lights of a gas station, stepped out into the storm just to feel the rain on my face. Real rain, real ground. Something to prove I hadn't slipped into some nightmare loop. And you know what? That was the night I learned something new about the road. Sometimes, the danger isn't just flesh and blood. Sometimes, the road itself plays tricks on you. Whether it was exhaustion, hallucination, or something I can't explain, I'll never know. But to this day, whenever I drive through Missouri in the rain, I keep my eyes locked straight ahead. Because I'm not sure I could handle seeing him again. Maybe it was a ghost. Maybe it was a trap. Or maybe it was just my tired brain painting shadows in the storm. But either way, it reminded me of one thing. Out here on these highways, you don't always get to choose what you see. But you do get to choose whether you stop. And I've learned I'm not stopping, not anymore. You'd think after Montana, after that storm in Missouri, I'd finally catch a break. But trucking doesn't hand out breaks. It hands out miles. And sometimes, those miles come with shadows. This last encounter happened in Oklahoma, off I-40, just outside a small town called Weatherford. Middle of the night. Again, I'd been hauling for almost 12 hours straight. My body was begging for rest. But I figured I'd push through another 50 miles before shutting down. That's when I noticed the headlights behind me. At first, nothing strange about it. Cars pass as truckers all the time, but this one didn't pass. It just stayed there. Same distance, mile after mile. I tapped my brakes lightly, enough to flash my brake lights. The car slowed too. Now my gut started churning. Another 5 miles, same thing. They were pacing me. Finally, I pulled into a rest area, hoping they'd pass. Instead, their headlights followed me right off the highway. That's when my instincts screamed trap. I didn't even park. I looped through the lot, steering around idling trucks, and rolled straight back onto the on-ramp. My heart was pounding as I checked the mirrors. The car followed. For another 10 miles, it clung to my bumper. Then suddenly, its high beams flipped on, blinding me in both mirrors. I couldn't see a thing but white light. I gritted my teeth, kept my hands tight on the wheel. Whoever they were trying to mess with me, trying to make me pull over or lose control. But I've been out here too long. I wasn't giving them that. I stayed steady at 65, calling out mile markers into my dashcam. My phone had no service, but I wanted it recorded just in case. Then, out of nowhere, the car swerved into the left lane and pulled up beside me. I glanced over, and my blood ran cold. There were 3 people inside, hoodies up, faces shadowed. The passenger held something shiny, looked like a pipe, or maybe even a gun. They started gesturing, pointing at the shoulder, waving for me to pull over. I shook my head and pressed the accelerator. My rig roared, engines straining as I pushed her harder than I normally would at night. They matched me. For almost 2 miles, we rode side by side. My truck shaking, their car weaving dangerously close. Then, just as quick as they'd appeared, they swerved off at the next exit ramp, tail lights vanishing into the dark. I didn't stop until I hit the next truck stop with a dozen rigs parked under bright sodium lights. I sat there for almost an hour, hands trembling on the wheel, replaying what had just happened. And the whole time, one thought burned in my mind. What would have happened if I'd stopped? See, folks, that's the question that keeps me up at night. Because out here, on these lonely stretches of highway, not every trap is obvious. Some are as simple as a pair of headlights that won't let go. That's why I share these stories. Not to scare you. Well, maybe a little, but mostly to warn you. Because the truth is, the road isn't just asphalt and mile markers. It's alive with people, good and bad. And sometimes it tests you. Montana tested me. Missouri tested me. Oklahoma tested me. And somehow I'm still here. Still driving, still telling the story. But I'll tell you this, I don't drive blind anymore. I don't assume the world is safe just because the highway looks empty. I've learned that danger wears a lot of disguises. A purple dress, dry shoes in the rain, a car that won't pass you. And if you take anything from my story tonight, take this. Trust your instincts. Trust your gut. Because on the road, hesitation can cost you everything. Now, I've been Ray Walker, 15 years on the highways and still rolling. And if you've been listening all this time, I've got one last request for you. If my story made you think twice, or if it kept you on the edge of your seat, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe for more stories from the road, and drop a comment down below. Tell me, would you have stopped that night? Because let me tell you something. Sometimes the only thing scarier than the road itself is what you might do if you stop.